of the commission has been lost. I think the results will be very poor. And as I said previously, I don't think there'll be any collections, or very minimal collections. Certainly not 800 billion, and certainly not the 178 billion that Bowman Gilfillan seemingly pulled up. And I don't see the SIU. I mean, I handed the SIU a case to get the case. They cancelled the contract that saved Eskom 10 billion. Eskom didn't even have the decency to come to me and say, thank you for and do we owe you some money for costs to me and my advocate to put that dossier together. But nevertheless, I'm not here for the money. I'm here for the purpose of trying to uncover corruption. As far as what I would recommend, and I think people need to start singing this in, is that we need to scrap all tariff applications until we see a full forensic report. How can we have the Zondo Commission, the public protector, everybody bringing out, the SIU, Bowman Gilfillan, other people bringing out corruption reports one upon another, and we don't have a full forensic on Eskom? Surely, if there's more than 100 billion rands, and Bowman talks about 178 and counting, I'm talking about 800 billion and counting, surely it's justification for a full forensic report. But you know what? Your government and your politicians and your board at Eskom will not do it, because it will finger very senior people in the organization and in our country. In terms of future options for energy, well, we're in an energy crisis, as the introducer mentioned to this conference, and I don't see Eskom getting you and me out of this energy crisis. I think they are too bankrupt. They are still corrupt. There's still lots of corruption happening on a daily basis. They're sitting with legacy technology, which they anyway can't fix up because they don't have the manpower and the know-how. They got rid of all the expertise that could have done the job. I think the business model has been changed since 2001, and I don't see them going back to the previous successful business model because that would be admitting defeat. And also, I don't see the current stakeholders, which is the government as the shareholder and the ANC as the controller of Eskom, going back to what was a winning recipe in 2001, where business, labor, and the public were represented on the Eskom Council and determined the direction and the efficiency and the mode of operation within Eskom. So I don't think we can expect anything better from Eskom. I think it's going to die. I think the vultures may be trying picking up some scraps from the grid, etc. But I don't expect, and I don't foresee Eskom actually ever recovering its former glory. I think those days are past, and they've penalized our economy, that we are now uncompetitive. That even the big ANC bigwigs are outsourcing their beneficiation of minerals to Malaysia. The smelting of manganese and chrome is all being outsourced, and we are not getting the extra value added and the jobs in South Africa. It's a crime against humanity as far as I can see. So I think the heydays are past, and from here on, it will be a struggle for survival day after day after day, unless if somebody can come up with a miracle technology that will relieve us from the pain of Eskom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ted, for your presentation. A very personal and very fiery presentation, which we know to expect from Ted. Thank you very much. I'm sure there'll be many questions. I see questions popping up now that you can answer later in the question and answer session. Our next speaker is Mr. Devin Pillay. Mr. Pillay is a UKZN alumnus. He completed his Master's in Engineering degree at UKZN. Mr. Pillay headed the drive in Eskom, focusing on demand response and energy efficiency for large corporation customers in South Africa. Devin's challenge and passion is providing innovation solutions and strong leadership in the green economy, and in so doing, reducing the global carbon footprint. He is director and CEO of the LTM Energy company, which he formed. Mr. Pillay, it takes me great pleasure to request your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to see if you can see my screen. Is that good?
Yeah, thank you very much, Devin.
All right, thank you for the opportunity. Following from Ted Blom's presentation, mine is not as juicy and spiced up, and I mean it in a good way. There's nothing less that I expect from Ted, knowing from some time, and his presentation style is quite direct, and I'm looking forward to the questions. I have some questions myself for Ted, but let's leave that for the question and answer session. Just moving on to, oh, I don't know why it's stuck. Sorry, let's get back. Can you see that?
No.
No, we can't.
You can't? Oh. Let me get back to share. You can?
Okay, that's good. Thank
That's
you.
good.
All right, we've seen this, the evolution of technology. I know there was a bullet point that Ted put on the technology advancement, and hopefully following my presentation, I can just throw a little bit more faith and sense of optimism on the technologies that are out there. So we've seen the advancements of, just to share with you, a hard disk drive in 1956 and looking at the size of a 5 meg versus what we see in 2020, it's quite significant in terms of the evolution that's taken place. Of the fixed line operators, if I recall, I had a Ericsson and a Nokia phone. You don't hear of those brands anymore. You probably hear of more Samsung and iPhones. So one has to be cautious in terms of the disruption in technologies, and that goes for Eskom as well, that the technology advancement, you got to be aware and cautious of what's happening. So in my presentation, I'll be talking about moving and migrating from the brown economy to the green economy. And I think it's key in terms of embracing green technologies, given the climate change challenges that we are experiencing, and it's a global challenge right now. I'm going to present just the global and South African landscape, moving to a real case, but not mentioning the client, the sustainability journey map, moving into a case study, and this case study is focused with the permission of FNB and RMB, I can share that, and then migrating into disruptive technologies and concluding. We've seen the global picture of where renewables have taken over from the conventional forms of energy being coal-fired predominantly, okay? On the right-hand side, what is very interesting, you're seeing solar PV significantly decreasing as well as storage. Now, the weakest link currently, the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. So, of course, storage is a huge, huge challenge, and it's probably the weakest link because of the cost. In my discussions, I will not only focus on battery storage, but I will also talk about a little bit about fuel cell, vanadium, and so forth. Those are other technologies that we need to look at, apart from lithium. From a South African context, we've seen an increase, as you can see, a huge tariff hike over from 1996 to 2021 of over 1,000% increase. And I think Ted alluded to that. It's quite significant in what is NERSA and NERSA's part in making sure that we have a fair tariff in place. Okay, sorry. And then from a water and sanitation tariff, you can see another steep increase as well. But I think key is the electricity tariff because we focus on energy. On the right-hand side, you see the stick and the carrot. There are measures where you're looking at the stick effect, where the soaring electricity price presents quite a punitive measure in itself. The unreliable supply being the load shedding that's taking place. Recently, South Africa it's mandatory now to look at energy performance certificates, right? Any building over 2,000 square meters, it's mandatory to have an energy performance certificate. Carbon tax. We've seen certain customers that are exposed to carbon tax, or large corporates, if not subject to carbon tax, there's compulsory carbon reporting, and of course, sustainability reporting. And then on the carrot side, you have tax incentives, carbon credits, and of course, reducing. There's cost savings when you reduce your energy bill. Okay. I think enough said from Ted on what the status quo is, given the load shedding. But it's not only on the energy supply, it's also on the ailing infrastructure that we have currently. You're seeing a lot of interruptions taking place because of security of supply, not only the energy supply. But the good news is, the ESG drivers, being environmental, social, and governance, a lot of customers and a lot of captains in the industry are responding to that. But more so the investors. The investors are responding, and if you can see the bottom line, the institutions investing other people's money should not only do well, but also do good. And that is key, because those are pressures mounting for corporates to do the right thing. I think everybody is familiar with the drivers of the global development funds in terms of the 17 goals, the United Nations. And in particular, if you look at energy playing in number 7, affordable and clean energy, in terms of sustainable cities, number 11, 13 being climate. So there's quite a few of these pillars that we need to focus on to ensure that we do the right thing, and for countries, not only corporates, to move in that direction. And I want to just move on to the sustainability journey map to give you an example of it. What we do is we sit with clients to say, okay, how do we migrate from where you are, your conventional building, meeting the minimum standards, and then migrating to net zero or becoming a net prosumer of energy. Now, obviously, it is important to understand the end state, because every client has a different end state. Now, there are technologies supporting what the end state, and how do you have this journey map. And this is one such example I'm going to share with you. So we take the clients to what the current state is, looking at what the future state is, and in the process of what the journey to excellence is. And of course, it's the green journey, as we would call it. For presenting a sound business case versus a quote, what is very important is that a lot of ESCOs, energy services companies such as ourselves, presents a quotation without presenting the client with a sound business case. And that's very important, because you need to leverage of the various tax incentives to make the business case as attractive as possible. And it's very important to sell the technology, because there's a financial committee usually, it's quite a challenge to overcome their just the bottom line approach. So it is important to ensure, how do you make this business case as sound as possible or attractive? Now, this is a very important slide, and this is a case example. Here's a client that wants to get to net zero after year 7, okay? And this is a real case study which I share with you. And this is a strategy that we followed. Now they're reducing the energy consumption, and they can reduce it till year 5 or year 3 to a certain level. And thereafter, they've exhausted the energy measures. But what's important is the carbon footprint decreases right to year 7, because that's their vision, to get to net zero after year 7. But you've got to ramp up with renewable energy. Now, we're not talking only solar, right? Of course, will be solar together with storage, but there's other opportunities that we look at in different energy mix, which I will allude to in my presentation in the future slides. Now, if you look at the 6 focus areas, cost optimization without getting savings, energy savings, but the reduction, if they're in the right tariff, you can reduce the cost. But utility efficiency, and that's where I'm just focusing on energy efficiency here. It is very important to look at the second pillar, and whether it's efficient lighting or HVAC, BMS optimization, etc., will fall under the second grouping. The third grouping, I think I spoke about it in terms of the infrastructure and making sure there's distribution or transmission lines coming through and there's no weakest point in that value chain, and infrastructure is very important. Thereafter, reducing the dependency on the grid, the conventional form of energy, which being Eskom coal-fired, and what is the alternative form, and putting those contingencies in place and how you harness green energy is important together with storage. From a business continuity, the life cycle costing is so important when assets come to its end of the year lifespan, that you could replace them with efficient technologies. And that's part of the focus here, and that's education that procurement have to go through. And of course, very lately for the health and safety drivers, especially with COVID, you've seen the HVAC regulations have changed, and compliance to the environment is very important, as well as the minimum standards. So those are pillars. I think we're just not focusing too much on the slide, but to augment the energy mix when you use solar or wind. It's very important to look at the energy mix, okay? And I think what we see in here is clear as how these different energy mix augment itself. But what I share with you, if you can look at my arrow, this is very important. Conduit hydro is generating 1/3 of Eskom tariff currently, and it's base load. So one has to look at conduit hydro, and this is what we look at, putting turbines into pipes, because if you take a Rand water or Mgeni water, for more appropriate for you, KwaZulu-Natal, is that they have to have pressure to pump water from one point to the other, or to your homes for that matter. And then they present reducing valves in the pipes. So instead of having these reducing valves, you can have these turbines to reduce the pressure without blowing your geysers for that matter. And that can generate energy at 1/3, which we shared. We're one of the first in Africa to do this and show the case studies. And we've just got appointed by Rand Water, where we're showing the feasibility of it to roll out to other areas. Okay. And there's other technologies which I'll share, like quad generation we'll talk about, where we used it before. So there are technologies out there that can provide the base load. Don't think only solar or wind because of the limiting factors of that technology. Just coming back from a management decision, when we work as a case study, moving into the case study, there was an aspiration. This is a case study for Roodepoort West Bank. I don't know if you're aware of it. If you go down the N1, and you will see the West Bank building, the F&B West Bank building, okay? And it's a beautiful building. Now, what is important, the landscape has changed, where you not only can deal with Eskom, you can actually source power from the municipality, okay? You're seeing the landscape changing, where customers now can build up to 10 megawatts. Mines are putting tenders out that can go 10 megawatts at a time, for whether it's renewable or other source of energy. Now, this is very important. Now, if you look at the bottom corner, it is about, if you want to think outside the box, it's important to be outside the box. If you recall, to draw those lines and without lifting your pen, and to only do that, you have to go outside the box. And this is very important to illustrate this, because one has to, when we did this case study, before entering the premises of a business, we looked at other measures. For example, what was the voltage upstream? Is the voltage appropriate? In this case, where we look at Roodepoort, there was the voltage was much higher than normal. And if you look at the secondary side, it was about 242 volts, and around 220, 230 is the nominal voltage on the secondary side. So we decreased the voltage, tapped down, and there was a 5% saving on the business itself at the bulk supplier. So this is thinking outside the box. Or for that matter, we can step up and take it a higher voltage and buy assets at a higher voltage. Okay? So this is the case example I'm sharing with you, where we talk about M plus N plus O equal to P, and I'd like to elaborate what that means. The M is for megawatts, which is clean energy. whether it's solar, whether it's wind, whether it's pipe hydro, which we spoke about. The N is for efficiencies, again, lighting. O is for optimization, as an example, whether you use smart metering. And I show you some examples on the left-hand side that was implemented in this beautiful building. I love this building from an architectural design perspective. Now, this won an international award. The 5-star, the aspiration is to get to net zero. We did an energy management strategy and policy. We achieved over a few years a 40% energy savings. We put on a 2 megawatt carport solar PV, zero to landfill, where we took organic, the food, and turned it into compost, and whatever they can use for their own gardening, they can sell the rest or give it for CSI programs to surrounding schools. And we achieved over 25% of water savings. I want to share just on the case study itself. This is the various solar PVs that we've implemented, but I wanted to share the actual case study. Please see if you can see the video.
In 2015, the West Bank FNB campus achieved a 4-star green building rating. To take it to a 5-star rating, the next sustainability project was to convert the deteriorating vinyl carports into solar power panels.
At West Bank, we've been really excited about this project. Quite frankly, everybody wins. Our staff win because they get decent covering for their cars that they park out in the sun. From a power perspective, we get to generate a substantial amount of our own power. And not only that, but we get to add power into the national grid, which is of course good for the power efficiency of our country.
Over weekends, more power is generated than the building needs, up to almost 3 million kilowatt hours per year, which can keep the lights on for up to 1,300 homes. The construction took 12 months, 75 tons of aluminium and 83 kilometers of cabling. That's enough to stretch from Joburg CBD to Pretoria CBD and halfway back.
We were not allowed to change the layout of the parking bays, which means that the panels aren't all facing true north. But we managed to still get a fairly good north-facing panel by introducing a flatbed tilted system that's facing or allowing all the panels to either face north or facing northeast or slightly northwest.
The carport system consists of 1,000 bays covered by 7,600 solar panels. The system generates enough power to reduce the building's demand by 50% during winter and 60% during summer. The solar power also reduces the building's carbon footprint by 2,700 tons of CO2 a year. The system will be maintained by 3 or 4 full-time on-site technicians with a backup crew available if needed.
So through this project, we of course believe that the campus can now go for a 5-star green building rating as what they wanted or management wanted. And of course, management got very excited. So the next question immediately, even before we got the 5-star, was, so what do we do to get a 6-star? So this new challenge for a 6-star, of course, speaks a lot to the FirstRand group pioneered by West Bank and FNB in terms of their innovation and their drive towards sustainability. So Altium Energy has already started with innovative ideas and some proposals to management to try and achieve a 6-star. And that's the kind of customers that we're interested in and the kind of attitude that we like, and therefore we would like to be associated with this campus for years to come.
Financially, it makes a lot of sense. The numbers stack up. It pays for itself in a reasonable period of time. And from a West Bank perspective, it once again demonstrates how innovative we are, how prepared we are to be at the leading edge of technology. We have an important shared value that talks about getting better and better. And I can't think of a better way that demonstrates that shared value.
Let me cut that off here. I hope you were able to see that clearly. Moving on to the next slide, I just want to share that a lot of talk and a hype created on Internet of Things. Now, I know that lots of people were talking about smart meters and what you're going to watch the space, how it's going to evolve. A lot of sensors and controllers will replace those smart meters. And how do you harness integration by embracing the IoT platforms? So this is going to change the whole new dimension of how each technology talks to each other. And I don't want to elaborate too much because of the limited time I have. From microgrids perspective, it is very important, and I call it the H factor, and I challenge any one of you when it comes to the Q&A session to perhaps tell me what do you think I refer to the H factor, because it's important when I talk about the H factor, but I'll leave that as one of the questions that I ask you. But moving from where we talk about the utility type of power, we're moving to microgrids, and microgrids is going to be the future. It's happening currently. I just been recently to Rwanda, where they're using microgrids in many of their utilities, and then it can connect to the grid or run in offline mode or off-grid mode. These are some of the projects that we've done. You can see this. In terms of the Coca-Cola, where we rolled out a lot of these energy for the water, giving the rural communities access to clean water and clean energy. I think what was important over here, we use solar panels to harness the clean energy. Then moving on to the middle is into the middle, where we rolled out using second-hand shipping containers for 4 kilowatt units and deployed about 39 of this 20-foot containerized solution in hybrid. So here they had energy, Eskom power, and we connected into hybrid with green power. Okay. And then on the right-hand side, extreme right, you see where we looked at taking energy to the communities, clean energy, and making sure that they have access where they ordinarily never had access to energy previously. Moving on to innovation, and I share this, and I think I spoke about on the center where you talked about the conduit hydro, putting these turbines in the pipes. The beautiful thing about it is not exposed as well, so it's not subject to theft like solar. These are two examples we did for Coca-Cola, where we use second-hand shipping containers. We can turn these into classrooms or libraries. You have an off-grid ATM. You can use the one top of the canteen. So there's various ways that we've done. These are real case example. This is the one for, where we talked about turning the food into compost. We use that machine. This is quad generation, about close on to 14 megawatts that we've done in MTN, where we sold quad generation like tri-generation. It's just that it has carbon scrubbing, but this was tri-generation. Now we're doing 2 projects looking at quad generation for 2 major clients in the country. It'll be the first, all right? And then moving on to some of the other technologies now, in terms of innovation, I think that'll be a game changer in terms of how we evolve. But I think what's very, very important in conclusion, that we need to make that change. We need to ensure that we are briefed and updated with the latest technology. The question is, it's not why, it's why not. And I think it's the next question is why not now? And I've been privileged to be associated with some of the best professors and engineers in the world, to have access to various technologies to ensure that going green does not compromise comfort, that actually has an improvement to your bottom line, and of course, leaving a brighter future for other generations to come. I hope that summarizes. I have 2 other videos. If time permits, I can share where we could, I shared what we did in a corporate. We also look at a water case. We use Liberty, but even a home, what can be done in a home? Thank you.
Thank you, Devin, for your forward-thinking presentation, showing us a bright future to mitigating South Africa's energy crisis. I found myself thinking, let's do it. I think it's probably pretty much, if the will's there, we'll find a way. Look, to the audience, we over time, but I've confirmed that we're going to extend. I've confirmed with our panelists that we're going to extend to +3, no later than that, regarding our questions and answers. Got quite a few questions and answers for the panelists. So if Ted and Devin are ready, I'll ask a couple of questions. The first one, Ted, you've been a bit quiet, so we're going to just send a question your way from Anonymous. It reads, if we cannot expect Eskom to play a role in solving the energy crisis, whom can we reasonably expect to lead this way? Hi, Ted.
Right, I'm back.
Thank you.
Yes, I think it's a big question, is who is going to solve our energy crisis? And I think at the end of the day, it's not going to be Eskom. I've shown to you how broken it is, and it's breaking down every day. They don't have the money, they don't have the skills, and they don't have the willpower. So I think going forward, and I did this paper about 2-3 years ago in Cape Town at the Utilities Week, I agree with Devin. The future lies in microgrids and mini grids, and the only people who will be left on the grid, the main grid, are the indigents who don't want to pay and cannot pay for power, and the large-scale smelters and industries who don't have enough land and cannot work off renewable energy. So the rest of us, I think, certainly for home use and for commercial use, will be off the grid, and we'll make our own power. And I foresee the power becoming far more efficient in production, and I see that the usage, and I think Devin alluded to that, is that there will be a major technology revolution in the consumption patterns of energy equipment. You already seen it with light bulbs going down to these unbelievable powerful LEDs. Even your cars have got them now. And certainly in Europe and the rest of the world, there has been a drive towards energy efficiency from home right through to industry. South Africa was supposed to be part of that under Minister Jumat Peterson, but then she got caught in the corruption involving the oil stocks in Saldanha, and she moved from that portfolio. So that needs to be revived, and some energy and money spent on that. And in fact, there was money from the Scandinavian countries to take all the townships off the grid. And you saw some of that in the form of all these solar water geysers that were installed. Unfortunately, more than half the money that came from the Scandinavians was again stolen through the channels of Eskom and Rotec. But I believe that if we can convince the foreigners that the stealing stops, they will maybe replenish some of those funds, and we can take more people off the grid. So the most, I think, if you look at it analytically, your main consumers from a household point of view of electricity is your geyser and your cooking. Maybe your washing machine as well if you're going to use hot water. But your lighting and security typically doesn't use much energy, and you can probably downscale your energy consumption patterns by 75% if you just make alternative plans in terms of your cooking utensils and your hot water. And hot water, solar geysers, I've seen technology, and if people want to contact me, I can put them in contact with the solar geyser technology that's more than 50% more efficient than the stuff that you bought up to last year. It's a small firm, they're in KwaZulu-Natal, And I've seen it with my own eyes. It's unbelievable the efficiency that they get out of a few pipes facing the sun. And then in terms of cooking, I think South Africa will eventually embark on a gas economy. The rest of the world, wherever you look at movies and everything, everybody cooks on gas. We're probably one of the few countries in the world who still cook with electricity. So, and gas is far more efficient and effective in terms of heating. It's instantaneous. It doesn't have to warm up like your oven before you bake a cake or whatever. It's just, you can put the stuff in and the heat's there immediately. So, yes, I think the future looks dark. Why? Because we haven't opened our eyes as to the new opportunities. But believe you me, as soon as we can get out of the stranglehold of this corrupt government and Eskom, corrupt Eskom, the future will start looking a lot better. And to the extent that I can help facilitate that future, I will do my best. And I think people like Devin and the universities with their research and development are very well placed to help us transcend from Eskom dependent to independent energy.
Thank you, Ted. Devin, a question from Tobeka Marlo. She says, since South Africa is facing a water crisis, does that have any direct impact on the energy crisis we are currently facing?
Oh, absolutely. The driver of a lot of activity, unbeknown to you and me, in this economy is energy.
Okay.
Yes.
Can Devin answer that question, please?
Okay, sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. I never get a fly. My apologies.
Thank you.
It's okay, Ted. I'll latch on to it. I think we're both in agreement. Of course, there's a correlation there. I think just stepping back, I mean, they talk about the nexus of life being energy, water, and food, right? Pretty important for survival, basic needs. And if you look at energy, the crisis situation, just conventional energy, and what the impact on climate change, you can see what it does. It's making more areas arid. So obviously, when we talk about using conventional energy being mostly coal-fired, it has a huge impact on climate change, and that, of course, has an impact on water. On the reverse situation, okay, where you have water shortages. Now, of course, you know about cooling that's required in the power stations, so that's huge. And most of these power stations are situated in dry areas. So access to water is a huge issue. If you recall, on day zero happened, there was huge concerns around the country. And it was also filtering in other areas. So there is that where you need water for power generation. On the other hand, if we keep on burning coal and fossil fuels, we are going to land into big problems because that's climate change and, you know, the drastic impact of climate change in terms of water. So one has to have a fine balance. And I think you need energy and water. You know, recently we deployed this with Coca-Cola, you know, giving access to clean energy, to clean water in rural communities. And it's unbelievable. With energy and water, now they're doing small-scale farming. So I think there was a question asked about, is this, you know, the technologies that we share, is it for different market segments? Yes, we showed it for different market segments, for high-end use, for the middle and the low-end use. And I think Ted hit the nail on the head. Identify your energy suckers. And of course, geyser loads, those who have pools, underfloor heating and so forth, are major energy consumers. And what do you do about it? Internationally, best practice, what you've seen is that they have smart devices that they control these devices remotely and switch off the geysers instead of load shedding. So it has a huge plus for the economy instead of interrupting the economy to do this remotely. But of course, there's certain things that needs to be, you know, attended to. As Ted again once said, there's people need to be held account in various ways. I'm always surprised with Ted's, who are those people involved in corruption, etc. We know there is corruption. The level of corruption, we don't, I'm always surprised to hear about it. You think you heard in the Zondo Commission, but following the presentation today, I heard more. But I hope I painted, just went a little bit around the nexus of life and the impact of water and energy. I think those are key ingredients for anything in life.
Thanks, Devin. Ted, this is more like a historical question regarding, I think, some type of pumped hydro solution. The question reads, what happened to the ambitious scheme on the Vaal River, or maybe it was the Orange River? Some type of mega power station, Ted? Do you know?
Okay. Look, there have been various schemes. To do pump storage, you need a particular geography. And that geography is in the Drakensberg and down in the Cape. There's one pump station, the Palmit station. There's two in the Drakensberg. The problem is the way that Eskom has built them. It might go down well with the greenies because it will tick the boxes that you drive over the power station, you can't see much other than two surge pipes. But Eskom chose the most expensive way to generate power from those systems, in that they've hollowed out caverns under the mountains to install power stations. As far as the Orange and River is concerned, there are schemes. There's Van der Kloof Dam. There are schemes on the, but they are normal hydro schemes. Pump storage schemes, just for what it's worth. I came across them for the first time in the 80s. And I couldn't understand it. I said, man, you know, it seems to me there's something wrong with the efficiencies here. And indeed, there is something wrong with the efficiencies, because pump storage schemes actually consume more power than they generate. Now, don't, before you shoot me, let me explain why they are then done. The only modus or justification for pump stations is that they can generate power in high demand times, when the power is more valuable than in the off-peak times at midnight, when the power is surplus and not being used. So it's not a volumetric argument, it's an economic argument. So yes, pump stations can help, but they don't generate extra energy. They actually consume energy. Can we afford more of those? Absolutely not. Not where we are at the moment, and typically private individuals cannot afford to spend money at the rate of knots to implement pump storage schemes. We'll have to find other alternatives. Thank you.
Okay, just to follow up, Ted, just from my side, I think it wasn't really about pumped hydro storage. It was more. And I know I might have put the words in your mouth. I thought it was the question was talking about hydro power on the Vaal River or Orange River. Okay,
so the Orange River really has, and to the best of my knowledge, there is not really an opportunity. You see, the issue is that you need to have fall. There's got to be a fall between the dam and the lower river to be able to accommodate hydro pump storage systems, or not pump storage, hydro systems. And to the best of my knowledge, the flow and the geography of the Orange River is such that those opportunities have already been implemented. As I said, the Van der Kloof Dam, and there's one or two other dams as well. The Vaal Huts system has already got hydro systems involved in it. And also, hydro is a good answer, but it's not dependable, as we've seen in Zambia. The whole Zambian economy, which relies extensively on hydro systems, came to a halt because of the drought, because of climate change. Now, I'm not a carbon feared person, or person that's scared of carbon. I believe this whole carbon debate still has to go a long way. And I don't buy what I hear every day in the newspapers about carbon being the cause of climate change. Climate change is happening. That's a fact. It's happened for the last 1 billion years or longer. And I'm not convinced that it's happening by the little bit of carbon that industry emits. Not that I'm happy about the other pollutants, but carbon certainly on its own is an easy target for politicians to tax. But whether it actually causes harm to the environment, I think the judgment on that is still outstanding.
Okay, thanks, Ted. We'll save that for another debate. Okay, Devin, a question from Glenn Cormack. He's the director of the Fairness Institute, and he has proposed that the answer for the energy crisis lies in South Africa reaching a green economy with organized labor playing a key role. Hence a push for no forced retrenchments, but rather job restructuring and creation, and employee share schemes and profit sharing. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that has to happen. Firstly, we heard about the just transition, moving from the brown economy to the green economy. One has to be cautious that there's been, towns being built around power stations, and how do we handle that? We've got to do that with caution. But on the other flip side, one has to be cautious as well that the market forces don't overtake the need to nurture this transition for it to be just. And where I'm coming from, it's again taking Nokia and Ericsson for that matter, and what happened to the cell phone technology, just wiped out in terms of the replacement, being replaced by other OEMs. So one has to be careful because the power lies in people's hands to make a choice. And if they make a choice that they can go off grid, and it gets to a place where you see storage, and I shared the graph where storage is actually decreasing in price, then they will choose that. And what will happen to the conventional energy being Eskom? So if Eskom has to sense that the transition has to be quicker than what they think, the luxury of time, we don't have that luxury of time because solar prices and storage prices are drastically decreasing. I think therein lies that opportunity to work, where you get organized labor, get them where we can start upskilling, where people were used to working in the brown economy and moving the jobs to a greener economy. The greener economy is it's a thriving economy. Worldwide, you've seen that. You've seen also that companies like Eskom that are steeped into conventional energy, being coal-fired and fossil fuels, they are actually losing value. So if that's not the signal that we need to take seriously and do something about it, then we have a problem. I think it's important that collectively, labor, together with key stakeholders being government, Eskom, and all the relevant other parties, including private sector, captains in the industry, come together and see how we can make it a just transition. We don't want to let Eskom just fail overnight. It's in our interest to do something, but let's have this transparency out. And I think, people like Ted are getting the message out there, provided, based on facts, making sure that the right people are held to account, and let's move on. Let's move and migrate toward the green economy because it's the right thing to do, and it is what best practice is all about.
Thank you, Devin. Just for the layperson here, Devin, can you explain the just transition?
I think for now, what we're seeing is for any transition to happen, there's got to be some fairness. I mean, we've seen this in many economies that you're stuck with the old regime, and in this case, being conventional energy, being fossil fuel, and you move into a new regime, and it's an implication where towns that are built around power stations and people that have families, what happens? Government has to consider this. They play a pivotal part as part of the economy to make this economy turn, and I think it's important we take heed of that. So the just transition, to make any transition just, is to address these issues that we faced on the table, to get the relevant captains in the industry and key stakeholders that I mentioned to make the transition just from the graph that I shared from the brown economy to the green economy. That's for me simplistically focusing on the special or addressing this subject matter.
Thank you, Devin.
Limitations, but just specifically focus on this.
Thank you, Devin. Ted, a question from Anonymous. It reads, municipality debt to Eskom is in excess of 20 billion annually. When these defaulting municipalities are threatened with disconnection, etc., the courts and government step in and ask that they be allowed to continue being supplied. How can Eskom expect to become profitable so long as this type of situation exists? There's a question similar to this that Ian West Lewis also raised a similar question, stating that even when Eskom provides supply, they're not getting the money.
Okay, it's fortuitous that the questions come to me. I've been quite deeply steeped in this in the last couple of years. In fact, I was out of town on a court case in a hearing in the Northern Cape just about 2 weeks ago. You see, you and I are bombarded by propaganda on a daily and weekly and monthly basis that Eskom is the holy cow, Eskom's doing everything right, and the municipalities are the full culprits of the breakdown in the service chain. I'm not exonerating the municipalities. I'm very aware because I've been hit with a bill of 50,000 rand for water for 1 month, and I had to pay it, and 4 years later I still haven't managed to resolve it. So I'm aware of the rot in the municipalities, but it's not all just a one-way show. I'm representing some municipality, as I've mentioned, where the outstanding amount on their bill is 3.2 billion rand. We've scrubbed that account. Eskom, if we are generous, is owed 800 million rand. The rest is overcharging, mischarging, fraudulent charging, and mismetering. And that type of example is more than prevalent in most of the municipalities. The reason they haven't been able to sort it out is because they don't have the intellectual and the experience, the intellectual background as to because most people that are currently in their jobs haven't been there for more than 12 or 15 years, so they don't know the history. But there's a court case which is going to the Constitutional Court, which will overturn this whole message that Eskom's trying to send out, that Eskom is right and the municipalities are wrong. There are instances where the municipalities have been delinquent, make no mistake, but it's not just a one-way show. And I will show that most of the municipalities have been overcharged by at least a factor of 50%. And that goes back to the overcharging of Eskom. They've overcharged you and me and the municipalities. And the reason the municipalities can't pay is because they get their money from workers, householders, employees, renters, and none of those people have received 500% plus salary increases over the last 12, 15 years. So it's beyond affordability for those people to pay these unjustified, corrupt, overpriced electricity tariffs. So when will normality return to the electricity tariff regime? Well, as soon as we get to the Constitutional Court. And as I said, that case is pending, and I've asked to be an amicus or a friend of the court in that matter, and we will give Eskom a dressing down, together with COCTA, SALGA, National Treasury, and the Ministry of Enterprises, Public Enterprises. We'll give them such a dressing down as to the corrupt overcharging of electricity tariffs since 2007, because it's in the Constitution that the electricity prices may not be above CPI. And none of those institutions I've mentioned now was tasked with policing Eskom tariffs, including NERSA. None of them have actually complied with the constitutional prerogative, which said that electricity tariffs may not be more than CPI. So all these corrupt tariff increases will have to be reversed one way or the other. And I can guarantee you that will spell the end of Eskom. So yes, as far as the municipality is concerned, I've got a soft spot because they are stuck between a rock and a hard place. They don't have the tools to defend themselves. I'm helping them get the tools in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Look, we are approaching 50:30, so I'll probably take 2 or 3 more questions. Devin, This one's from Matha, and the question reads, what are the most forward-looking options in terms of the just transition and a clean energy future, which can address the climate and societal needs under the monopolies that exist today?
Yeah, so let's look at this. In terms of the just transition, I mean, looking at the social needs, especially the labor force, right? I think one has to, government has to step in here in terms of the role they play in training and development, in redeployment. Besides government, as I said, there's other captains, private sector, even CETA, where we need their help to come in together from retraining the skills that we have in, let's call it the brown economy. Very, very important. In terms of the opportunities that lie in the green economy, I spoke about conduit hydro. Why isn't Africa rolling conduit hydro is concerning. Why isn't Africa rolling out tri-generation or quad generation is a huge concern, because I mean, Ted was alluding to the spiraling prices, and Eskom would land itself in trouble. But one has to take note that the cost of the life cycle cost, which I mentioned to you for pipe hydro or conduit hydro, is a third of Eskom price, less than 50 cents per kilowatt hour. Now that is a business case in itself, right? Eskom should now be focusing on that, and how do they shift, not just leave these towns that are, where the towns around the power stations. Don't ignore that, but understand what we need to get to and how we migrate them, bringing organized labor into the whole equation. I think that's important, but let's not ignore those breaking technologies out there like conduit hydro. I've seen one of the people who I've got a question which talks about nuclear, and my question around nuclear is, there is a space and time, but if you've got other alternative technologies that supports the green economy, that's got a much better business case, and from a risk mitigation perspective, we've seen what happened in Japan. We've seen Germany make that migration, and so has Japan. How do we learn from that to migrate accordingly?
Okay, in actual fact, Devin, that was going to be my final question to both of you, regarding not just nuclear, but hydrogen economy as well. And also maybe a comment or two about micro-nuclear, the micro-nuclear perspective. So Devin, if you could just elaborate a little bit, and then Ted, if you could answer as well. And the question reads, would it also be reasonable to have similar optimism in safe nuclear and hydrogen, which promises to be the final solution that ticks all boxes? I mean, so for example, I know, for example, we're all petrified, well, many of us are petrified of nuclear fission, but there is nuclear fusion on the horizon as well. Could you comment to that, Devin, and then Ted afterwards?
Yeah. So Lay, I'd just like to state this from a nuclear perspective. If you're talking large scale, I'm not a supporter of that. France as well is decommissioning nuclear as well. But from a fuel cell technology, from a smaller scale, I think there's room for that. I've seen fuel cells that we've used in the telco industry. We're rolling it out as compared to lithium-ion batteries. And there's a company out here from Taiwan who's got the local manufacturing in KwaZulu-Natal, I believe. And using the technologies, it just makes sense. In fact, they actually fund it as well. So you can see there's a move towards a lot of fuel cell technologies that's happening at the moment. But this is not my area of specialty, nuclear. I'm always like to be educated in this environment. And I'm not too sure Ted has got more more experience and more advice in that sector.
Yeah, thank you, Ted. If you can take it up, I can see Champy at the bit there.
Yeah, I don't want to hog your show, but anyway, thank you very much. I've had 30-odd years exposure to the nuclear industry, and I certainly think, let me just give a little bit, a 2-second breakdown. Koeberg was technology version number 2 in terms of the legacy of nuclear developments. The world is currently at level or stage 4 nuclear developments, which are supposed to be far safer, far more efficient, and far more predictable in terms of delivery costs and so on. However, the big problem with these legacy technology issues is time, and time is not on our side. Across the world, it takes longer than 8 years, probably close to 12 to 14 years to develop and build and do the seismic work that's required before you can plant up a nuclear station. As far as micronuclear or small-scale embedded nuclear technology is concerned, I am very excited, and I'm actually aligned with a development that will hopefully become a household or citywide generator for power in the distributed model, as I've been talking about, and as Devin has also talked about in terms of microgrids. The microgrids are not defined as to how many households are connected to them. Small towns and cities can connect it. The micro or the small scale embedded generators typically generate between 50 and 200 megawatts. The technology that's currently available means they are low pressure. So there's no risk of explosions. They are air-cooled. They don't need water for cooling, so you can put them in arid towns in the Karoo or the Free State or wherever you want to put them. They don't need water for cooling. And they're also low maintenance. They only need to be restocked with fuel once every 12 years. And as for those greenies who are worried about the residue of the nuclear fuel, that fuel can nowadays be reprocessed. So, I mean, I really think it's a good news story in terms of the development of technologies. And once it's built or delivered, the price path of nuclear is very, very predictable. In fact, Koeberg is today the cheapest supply, even under a corrupt and mismanaged Eskom, where they've now got 13 managers at the nuclear plant where there used to be 1. Even though Eskom's nuclear project, Koeberg, is the cheapest alternative in its whole fleet. It should be much less than 40 cents. I'm told last week at Montage said it was 40 cents a kilowatt hour. But certainly it's a predictable price path, and contrary to coal, which is always on an increasing price path because of labor costs and dispersion from mining activities, you always mine further and further away, and the cost goes up exponentially. I think that there could be a bright future for nuclear because it's available 24/7. It's now safe. It's in modular size, and the time horizon has been clipped. It hasn't been clipped enough, but I think that once that they get to off-the-shelf solutions, you will be able to install a micro-nuclear plant within 24 months.
Thank you very much, Ted. Devin, it looks like you wanted to say something. We didn't have much discussion on hydrogen. Do you want to comment on the future of hydrogen, and then we'll call it a day?
Look, I think if we enter into discussion, we need lots more time. What I'd like to share is that, to those that want to actually look at some of the case studies that we've done and come out there and see it in action, whether it's microgrids that we've rolled out together with Coca-Cola, with the large telcos. We contracted with all the 3 major telcos or all 4 major banks. Come out there and see it, whether it's fuel cell, or whether it's the conduit hydro I alluded to, whatever I shared as case studies. What we are about is about, it's like a show and tell, but yeah, it's about making sure that the public or our competitors know about this and can replicate. Because if we've got a blueprint, why can't you replicate this throughout Africa for that matter? And that is the key message here. Take a successful case study, a sound business case, and replicate. I urge you to look at some of the case studies in our website, but come through. We can organize too. As I'm also the president of the ESCO Association of Southern Africa. I have a duty to ensure that the SMMEs and smaller ESCOs are trained and developed accordingly. So it's a two-hat approach. So I'd like to just conclude by stating that to you. One thing I forgot to mention, the H factor. I mentioned the H factor. Nobody, so it's not a two-way conversation, but I was hoping that somebody gives us a response on that. You know, the H factor is usually when you talk about the human factor.
Devin, you're on mute. Devin, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So when somebody talks about H factor and I'm only human, it's about limiting beliefs. I implore the human factor. It's about unlimited beliefs and how you can work together in collaboration and harness that human spirit. And I think the power lies in our hands to make a difference. Yes, there is a monopoly called Eskom. Yes, they need to be held account. Their people need to be held account. They've taken and robbed taxpayers of their money, you and I, and they've got to be held account. But more so, I think what we need to do is make key decisions and understand what's available and how do we work together and how do we combine our strength and make 1 + 1 = 3. I challenge you out there to come together and make the difference.
Okay. Thank you, Devin, and thank you, Ted Bloom, and thank you, Devin Pillay, for contributing to this extended webinar. It is clear that the solution to our energy crisis is sustainable energy, that's for sure. It's a golden thread that seems to connect social and economic development with environmental and sustainability. This will most certainly allow South Africa to continue to grow and develop, for sure. The sustainable energy solution to our crisis will eventually be reached. It's just like, how much are we going to burn up until we reach that? Are we going to finish all the fossil fuels before we reach this point? Or are we going to finish all the fossil fuels and then get forced to reach a sustainable future? Okay, from my side, thank you very much. Norma, you want to conclude?
Thank you, Lee. Thank you so much for doing such a wonderful job facilitating this webinar. I would like to also thank our speakers this afternoon, Mr. Ted Bloom and Mr. Devin Pillay, for your insights and input in this very important conversation that we had this afternoon. So it is clear that we all have to work together to overcome this crisis. We all need we are all invested in this energy crisis. So it's important that we all work together to find solutions. I would like to also thank the audience, more importantly, for being here, for taking the time this afternoon to be with us. We really appreciate that. And I also want to finally thank Kurt from our ICS for assisting us with broadcasting this webinar live on our YouTube. Thank you so much. And finally, Shakila for organizing the webinar. Thank you so much, and have a good evening and stay safe. I hope we're going to be seeing you